Okay, cool. So yeah, I think first of all, it's best to get a little bit about yourself. Where are you currently right now? What's our goal looking like? How many applications we're firing off? So if you do 5 minutes or so.
Mhm. Yeah, so in terms of the question, are you asking sort of where I'm applying at the moment and or my previous?
I think a little bit of previous experience first of all, and then where we're planning to get to in terms of role, company size, all of that.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, so I've literally just finished my 3-year Bachelor of Science. I did psychology at Newcastle University. So that was from September 2022 to July of 2025, which, incredible degree, loved it, loved my time there. Going into it, I did think I was probably going to end up going into psychology, but then I soon realised that the parts of my degree that I really, really enjoyed and was the best at did involve a lot of numbers. So, for example, statistics. Getting 84% in that module, I was like, hold on, I've enjoyed this and done really well here. Perhaps finance is something I want to explore. And so I think it was actually the summer of second year that I realised that I did want to go into finance. And at that point, I then thought, well, look, I'm going to have to get some experience in order to strengthen my applications and, to confirm that finance is for me. And so I then secured a 2-month commercial finance internship at TJX Europe in their Watford office. Literally just did that. It was from, when would it have been, July to September of this year, which was just honestly the best time ever. Like, I'd recommend TJX to anyone. And then that kind of honed in just through some project work that I did, that audit would be a good graduate scheme to go for. So then now what I'm thinking is getting my 3-year training contract, ideally getting the ACA, doing an audit graduate scheme, and then we'll see where we go from there in terms of the future. But yeah, that's kind of a bit about my background, essentially.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, it sounds like you've got quite a bit done. And yeah, any more than 3 years, I don't think you have to plan out necessarily. So
Yeah.
that's a good place to be. TJX, are they the people that they work with TK Maxx, right?
So it's
Yeah,
TK Maxx and HomeSense combined. That they're called
yeah.
TJX together.
Ah,
I was a
got
bit
it.
confused when I first started working there. I was like, what is this company? This sounds familiar.
Yeah. I've got a few friends that have done like software internships and stuff there. So I've heard of them
Yeah.
before. But yeah.
Oh, they're
Oh, that's
brilliant. The
awesome.
culture as well was just, it was just such a lovely, it just felt so sort of inclusive. And it wasn't like
Mhm.
I think a lot of what, I suppose, sort of bigger, specifically financial services, it can be quite a deliver or die culture. But at
Yeah.
TJX, it was just so, one of their sort of cultural values was that results are critical, but mistakes are acceptable. And so I think that was a fabulous sort of less pressured introduction to finance, because when I'm first learning something new, I was a bit like, oh, this is a bit scary. So learning in that environment was very sort of encouraging. And then moving forwards, I could potentially go into a more pressurized environment and cope
Yeah.
hopefully well. So
Yeah,
yeah.
definitely. I think there's a big difference between places that are considered like good careers and places that are considered good starting points. So to already
100%.
have that start, somewhere that you said a bit more laid back, a bit less pressurized, I think is a really good position for you to be in and have already done. So yeah, a bit about us. My name's Liam or Liam-Elio. I don't mind which one. I went to the University of Nottingham for 3 years and then did a Master's of Research in Satellite Tech. My degree originally is in Geography and Stats. Probably didn't do as much stats as you though, because halfway through the year they kind of cut it off a little bit. So now I work as a technology consultant and I also run CMD Careers on the side. And essentially, our whole purpose is when I was at university, it took me a long time and a lot of good mentorship to kind of figure out what I wanted to do. And not so much what I wanted to do, also how to go about doing it. I think university is a lot of hidden games and it's a lot of hidden networking that you might not necessarily know about unless someone pulls you aside and teaches you it. So I didn't know what consulting was before I went to uni, and now it's one of the main things I do as a job. And so that mentorship pathway is something I want to pass on to other students and give back. So we work with universities, students, and schools to essentially either do one-to-one sessions like this or go in and do workshops. We also work with businesses to help them understand how to most benefit students. So I've been running that for about a year now, and it's been going really well. We're building our team up, and I'm excited with where it's going. So we run sessions like this where basically we'll be doing a quick one-to-one today. We'll go over a bit about you, a bit about your CV, and then going into the application strategy. So what we mean by this is how many applications we're firing off a day, how confident are we feeling about that. There's a lot of stuff where people get wrong here. You know, they come to us and like, oh, I'm doing 50 applications a day, and we're like, don't do that.
That's quite
'Cause,
excessive.
yeah,
Sounds like
you know, like
impossible.
by the time you start hitting psychometrics or interviews, you know, like best case scenario, you get 50 return to interviews. Like that would stress me out. I do not want to plan for
Yeah.
50 interviews in a month. Like
100%. Well, I think that's the thing I realised was that, you know, going into this, I had this idea of applying to loads of places. But then I thought, like, there's actually only a feasible amount of places you can apply to and then actually sustain in terms of the applications, because, you know, I think you have to prioritise throughout the process, because it's great to keep on applying to places. But if you're then applying to loads and then can't do the psychometric tests, you're not going to progress anyway. So I think
yeah.
it's so important to get that balance actually between, you know, firing off applications but also going through with them. I think it's definitely something I'm still trying to figure out actually myself, but
Yeah, I think like figuring out that pacing is so important, especially because it'll change over time. You know, like for a lot of students, especially, you know, good universities, good courses, high performing students, this will be the first time where they get multiple rejections in a week.
yeah,
And it takes a toll, you know, to be someone who's always done quite well to receiving potentially 10, 20 rejections every few months. It does take a toll on people. So even where you start and where you end up you have to think about what's sustainable then versus what's sustainable now as well. So that burn rate is really important to figure out.
yeah,
Okay, that's some great context. What were you going to say there? Sorry, didn't need to
I
cut
was
you
just
off.
going to say that just to your point, like you mentioned earlier about the whole networking thing, and how important that was, and I just thought that was such a good point, because at uni, you know, when I was first applying for internships for this summer, you know, a while ago, I just had no idea, like, you know, it was my first time applying for any kind of, you know, sort of corporate employment, I suppose, and I just had no idea about the importance of networking, and I feel like it's not something that is mentioned enough at university at all. And so now I feel like I'm definitely trying to make the effort in terms of networking more, because I think you never realize the opportunities you'll get through just speaking to people.
Yeah.
And even if like an opportunity doesn't land, it's so much fun just to, I feel like, learn about people's paths and how they've got there or why they've got there, you know, etc. So I think that was a really, really like interesting point that you made.
Yeah, I think that's the thing as well, is like a lot of people think of networking as kind of this on-off switch thing
No,
where
it's constant.
like they'll do it when the time's right. And it's like that's not really how it works, because you
No,
don't
there's
know who's
never.
in the room, you don't know what opportunities are available. If you're only networking when you think, you know, there's an opportunity in front of you, you miss out on so many things. You know, one
100%.
pet peeve for me is always people with lecturers. Lecturers are very, you know, accomplished people. They've got their PhDs, they're well networked, and no one really takes advantage of that fact. You know, like I get the idea that maybe you don't want to go into academia, but that professor or that lecturer, by the process of getting their PhD, would have met so many people. Most of them would have went into industry. That's a good first place to network. And I
Yeah.
think it's very strange that universities don't set themselves up as almost these hubs of networking
Yeah.
in a much more explicit way.
Yeah.
But the good part of it is that less people that do it, the more advantage you take out of it. So it would be great for other people to do it, but I think it's also worth considering the kind of unfair advantage that you get from it, and then leveraging that, I think, is really important. So for the CV, I've got it up now. I've blocked
Yeah.
out all of your personal details. Do you mind if I just share it so
Yeah,
people can see what we're
100%.
looking at? So, so as I said, I'm pretty happy with this. I actually think most of it's quite good.
Hmm.
Let me know when you can see it.
Yeah, I can see it now.
Awesome, fantastic. So I'm pretty happy with most of this. A lot of this will be small changes because we're just at a level where this is quite good. So usually the main things I'm looking at here is the format. This can be really dodgy sometimes. People can have CVs that are kind of cut into two sections. So you've got like kind of a article style paragraph down here, an article style paragraph down here.
Hmm.
It doesn't work very well. This is a much better way of doing it where it's all just one long section and we're
Hmm.
running down like this.
Yeah.
There's some good experience here. I would potentially move this to
Hmm.
here and I'd move this to here, not because this isn't impressive, but because these are all, let's call them big firms, right? You've got Goldman
Yeah.
Sachs, you've got TGX, and then you've got Deloitte. And then these two things, I imagine this was a part-time job, and
Yeah.
this is very impressive, but it's kind of not a big firm, it's your own thing. So I think
Hmm.
that would make sense.
Okay.
The way that I would also then kind of frame it is I wouldn't call this related. I'd call this something like professional experience or relevant experience to draw kind of attention to the fact that these are your big kind of hitters, the big places you've worked. It is good to have a few big places where you've worked on your CV because it shows companies that you're already used to those office environments. That can be really useful. It's not necessarily a deal breaker if you don't have it. You can leverage other experience, but having an internship and already having moved in that direction, I think is a really good position to be in.
I also think that with the internships, like you don't know what you don't know. With like
Yeah.
before my commercial finance internship, I had some preconceptions of what it would be like, and I knew it would be a valuable opportunity. But I think it was just single-handedly the most valuable opportunity in terms of advancing my career, and just not even specific to the field that you go into, but just also in general, the way that corporate life is like, etiquette, etc., the way you interact with colleagues, like even the confidence it gives you. I think internships are just honestly the best thing.
Yeah, I think definitely placements and internships, they give
Yeah.
you a lot of value in terms of the skills of working in an office and the
Mhm.
skills of having that confidence if you don't necessarily have it already, I think is really important beyond even potentially the project work you do,
Mhm.
especially with certain internships and placements. You're not going to be there long enough to impact projects necessarily, but it's getting your foot in the door. And again, as
Mhm.
we said, that networking element,
Yeah.
if you've already been in that office, chances are you'll stand a better chance than someone that hasn't. So
Yeah.
all of that I'm pretty happy with. At the
Mhm.
top here, I like most of this. I just think we could condense it.
Okay,
So
brilliant.
what we're probably looking at doing is I would make this, and I'll send this all to you as notes and a template. I
Okay.
like that we're talking about what we've been awarded. That's great. I don't think we need this part here. One, I think it's a little bit kind of wishy-washy. It's not that
Yeah.
it's not true, it's just that it's taking up space.
Yeah.
And then what we'll do with it is this here will be our relevant modules. And instead of having like 3 to 4 lines going through each module, we'll put
Mhm.
3 modules all on one line, basically saying statistics, bracket 84%,
Yeah.
Excel, such and such, such and such. I think it will just clear up what we're showing here a little bit better. And
Yeah.
again, we don't need to say what it showed necessarily here. I know that sounds a bit weird because when we talk about CVs, we're like always show like value, always show what you've done.
Yeah.
That's true, but it's for the experience. I think
Mhm.
for things like education or for things where it's fairly obvious what it's gave you, like for instance, the first class, of course that shows academic excellence and strong
Yeah.
personal drive. Like you're not giving me anything that the content itself doesn't already show. And this is a big mistake a lot of people make with CVs is you're not using examples and case studies to explain why that thing's good.
Mhm.
Instead, we should be using examples and case studies to draw more value out of it. So
Mhm.
when we're looking at things like the experience, this makes a bit more sense. So for things like your KPI focus, all of this is good. Analyzing on stores is good. But then when we're talking about underperforming regions, what did that actually do for the company? So the two best ways of talking about this in terms of value is did it save money? Did it save time? Or did it make the process more efficient? Because all three of those things are really easy to measure in terms of costs. And if you can cost save and show that on a CV, then you're
Mhm.
definitely worth hiring. So,
Mhm.
what about highlighting the underperforming regions actually led to increased value? Was it to do with we could then add more efficiencies to that system? Were those regions reviewed? What came out of it?
So actually, that's a really good point, because at the whole format here, I actually was a little bit worried about this. So essentially, bullet point 1 and bullet point 2 there, so the KPI analysis and then the data-driven insights, the point below it, that was actually originally one sentence.
They were linked. Got it.
But because it went over 2 lines, I thought, oh no, that's too long, they won't read it. So actually that's linked. So it's led KPI analysis across 820 stores. And then what I did through that was highlighting underperforming regions and delivered insights which then proved that the strategies were effective in leading to a 4% uplift. So it was a little bit of a sort of handful to write, so I thought I could separate them, but I didn't realize that wasn't clear, so I'm more than happy to merge them together.
I think the best way to do this, and it's already strong, but start with the value you created rather than the thing you did. So I would start with it's the uplift right here. Yeah, it's the uplift. So I would start with the sales uplift, basically saying that you've secured that. Secured is usually a good word for this. Yeah, you've secured a sales uplift, and then how you did that. And then again, I think it's about just really cutting the language down again. So you secured the uplift through the KPI focused analysis. I don't think you even have to say it's Excel. That was across 820 stores, highlighting underperforming regions. And I think that's enough. And that would fit into one bullet point, right? And then it also saves you this bullet point to either write something else or potentially bring in more experience.
Yeah.
Because one thing that I think is worth raising here is it's worth having all your bullet points pretty much the same number. Not super critical, but as you get more experience, I prefer to see a few more positions with 3 bullet points each than like 3 bullet points and 5 bullet points and 3 again. I think it just helps show the scale of what you've done a bit more. But again, like as I said, we're really picking at efficiencies here because this is already quite strong.
Cool, thank you.
It's all good. And on that kind of notion of moving this 4% up to here, I think you could hit some of these metrics sooner. So front loading the value, I think, is really important. So again, instead of saying what we've done, which is the collaborated part, can we talk about faster what that collaboration led to? And is there any metrics to link to that, right? So for instance, just as an example, if this collaboration led to an event, then let's start with the event. Or if it led to a cost saving, start with a cost saving, because we read left to right. So if we have the most important information on the left, it means that it's going to get seen faster, which is really important for when people are scanning through your CV. So here you do it well. You've said you've generated the profit almost instantly. That is the most important part.
Yeah. I think it's more effective that way, because then you can sort of immediately see the impact. As you said, we're reading, we want to see from left to right the impact to then how you achieved it.
Yeah. And I think where people get stuck with it is the KPI focus is also really important, but so is the sales uplift. So I see why you've done it the way you've done it. But I think if we take this approach where we're constantly talking about the final value, I think that's a useful way of going about it. You actually do it really well in this section.
Thank you.
I imagine because it's your own thing, you're focusing a bit more on like
yeah.
Okay. And then for the additional experience, I like it. I think we can just build more into it. Was this kind of a insight day or like a forage course equivalent type thing?
So that was just like a little insight day with Deloitte. It was actually, I think it was more of like a webinar. So there was like 2 webinars within the program, and it was really helpful because it was specifically focused on getting women into audit, because women are underrepresented in financial services, so that it was just really helpful in terms of getting that first understanding into the application process. It was more informative about the application process, as opposed to sort of being super insightful about audit and exactly what it involves and all of this stuff. So it was more, I don't think it's necessarily an impressive experience, but I more just wanted to include it in terms of showcasing initiative, and it was super useful in terms of just getting that initial understanding of the application process for audit.
Yeah, well, first of all, it does show initiative, but also it shows that progress, right? Like a lot of student CVs will read like this, because you're obviously not going to go in with a student CV being like, oh, I've worked at all of these jobs and this is all my professional experience. So I think having something that shows you started here and then we went to like here, and this I imagine was a bit more recent, which is good, because it shows that after you finish this, you're still continuing that learning, which is a big thing we'll potentially touch on about LinkedIn a bit later, is you want to be showing recruiters that you're constantly pushing your training, pushing learning, because there's a big difference between being a student who's left university or is still in university and positioning yourself as a future professional who's already engaging with that industry, right? And that's the important difference here.
Because also, I think that's a good point as well, because I was doing some job simulations, you know, type practice and then actual assessments. And one of the questions that came up was, it was something like, how do you make sure you're somebody that's constantly expanding their skills and knowledge, or something like that, and you had 2 minutes to answer it. And what I actually focused on there was the skills part of my CV, so where I've taken relevant courses, and I actually highlighted the fact that I'm constantly trying to expand my knowledge through, you know, directly seeking out courses in addition to my sort of mandatory things like 9 to 5 or my degree. So, you know, I could mention things like the Goldman Sachs simulation, or like the Excel courses that I've been doing. And I think the other thing is that because I didn't realize I wanted to do finance until, you know, only just over a year ago, I didn't have that sort of long history of taking initiative in things like societies. So I was a bit worried about that. And I was thinking, well, you know, what I can do is sort of add in more courses to show more initiative recently. So hopefully that sort of, you know, backs up evidence that I am trying to increase my knowledge and trying to, you know, expand my expertise and things like that.
Yeah, I think that's really important. It's an interesting one with skills, because potentially we're going to disagree here. I potentially take them off a CV. There's a few reasons why. You've basically maxed out all the space you can currently use, and I wouldn't get rid of any of these experiences. So something else kind of has to go. Potentially we'd get rid of this because it's the weakest one, but it's still quite good, as we've said. Skills are a very interesting one, because I think they're really useful. And before LinkedIn, I'd say always have your skills on your CV. But now we've got LinkedIn, you've got a skills section on LinkedIn already. And a lot of the stuff that you'll be putting on LinkedIn should be the certificates and the courses you've already got. So there's kind of this duplication of effort here going on, where I don't think, unless they're super technical, it's worth having skills on a CV. And then the second part of that is any skills that are on a CV should already be self-evident, because we've covered them here, right? Basically, if we're talking about team leadership goes in experience, and you can show not only the skill, you can also show where the value was added and what you actually did. The big gripe I have with skills sections is, because we're making this into kind of a list, we can't actually explain any of it, right? We're just going through it as fast as possible. So all of this is good. I'd still be looking to take it out. The only exceptions I'd have is on achievements. Pretty much all of this should be in your experience, because it links directly to a role. And this up here, where you're a top psych graduate, that should be in your education, especially because it came with an undergraduate award. Definitely put that in your education. CVs are left to right, they're also up to down. So anything that's important here or here, right? We're already talking about being a first class grad. So why not also talk about the fact that actually you got an award out of that? Because that's kind of the level above first class grad, right? So I think that's worth thinking about. And then the only bit of red, almost everyone has this in CVs we review.
Yeah.
You look quite young. I imagine you're quite young.
Yeah.
No one will be surprised that you know how to use Microsoft Word and PowerPoint.
Yeah.
It will be something that is almost guaranteed. So it's kind of
Yeah.
wasting space. It
Okay.
also calls into question other skills. So we've had this before, not so much in this CV because you back it up further, but I've had it in CVs before where someone's put down 5 or 6 skills and then they've also put Microsoft Word and PowerPoint. I've now got to make a choice. Are they really good at all of those other 4 things? And they've also included Microsoft Word and PowerPoint. Or are they as good at those 4 things as they are at Microsoft and PowerPoint, which basically calls into question how legitimate are those other 4 skills, right? Because you get
Yeah.
lots of people who will put down, I'm a beginner in Python, or, I'm intermediate at R. And then you've got to figure out, well, how good are you actually at those things? So I
Yeah.
personally take them out.
Okay. I think the other thing is also, I'm just thinking as well in terms of the skills.
Yeah.
If I was to include them, as you said earlier, I think that then sort of evidences more the way that you've applied them as well.
Yeah.
So I think,
Yeah.
for example, with, I don't know, for example, SPSS or, well, I did use that in my degree, but something like IBM Planning Analytics as well. I've since updated my CV with that. I learned that at TJX. And so I think having that evidence of where you've applied it would potentially also be quite a tick boxing for employers as well.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. Like anything that we put in skills, unless you're like in a tech role where there's just tons and tons of like frameworks or programming languages that you just wouldn't be able to cover them sensibly up here, we can put it up here. So you're completely right. Like any programs that you've learned to use should be in your experience here. And I think that works a lot better. I think the reason we used to have skills sections is because we didn't have LinkedIn and you
Yeah.
couldn't quickly see what people's skills were.
Yeah.
But most recruiters will be checking your LinkedIn if they're interested at you at some point anyway. So it seems to me like wasted space. Obviously, if there's things that you think are really key to your application, keep them in. But again, I would find a better way to incorporate them than essentially like listing them out because it doesn't do you much service essentially.
Okay, 100%.
Interests are an interesting one as well. I think you can keep it. I just potentially look at other places where these fit better. So, for instance, yeah, the climbing was with the university, right? So again, we were talking a little bit earlier. You were a little bit conscious you didn't have many societies on your application. I take it climbing was a society you were part of. You're part of the club, right?
Yeah.
There'll be stuff we can draw from that. I think it should potentially go into education.
Okay.
Now, what we're going to do with those 3 to 4 lines of space we've now created is right at the top, I think you'd benefit from a 2 to 3 sentence summary on essentially what you've achieved, what you're not necessarily interested in, because that can get a bit weak, but where you want to go and what experience you already have, right? So for you, it'd be super simple. First class graduate, got statistics, we've got a psychology, and then after that, we're looking at audit, and then here's all the stuff we've done in audit, here's the opportunities we're interested in. I think that will frame your CV a lot better than going straight in with education.
And the thing is, I actually do. So when I was crafting my CV, it was originally like, 2 pages, when it first begins, you've got experiences left, right, and center.
Yeah.
And I actually did have a personal summary, but I realized, oh no, it's over a page long. And I thought I couldn't cut it down anymore. So actually, if I could take those things out that you mentioned, I would actually really want to put that personal summary back in, because I did quite like it. And I also think it does provide just, a couple of sentences of a summary of just who you are, and they can sort of get a bit more of a sense of you rather than just bullet points. So I would definitely be very happy to, alter space, take things out, add that back in.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think once you've got your 1-page CV, you can start seeing how much extra space you can also save. So another good one here is I would make this 2 lines. And the way we're going to get those extra lines is by cutting this down a little bit. But to have your A levels and your GCSEs in 1 line, I think is a little bit hard to read. If people are scanning this, I think they'll want it on 2 separate lines. That's how I see it done a lot of the time, at least. But this
Yeah.
is really good. That's actually quite a good way of doing English as well. I usually just tell people to put literature, but I might steal
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Because I was kind of like, I don't have the space, so let me just do 9-9, and I'm sure they'll love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. No, it's a good way of doing it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the CV's pretty strong. There's a
Oh,
few things we can change up, but you've got metrics, you've got experience, you've got a sensible structure. There's
yeah.
nothing in this that is actually bad or outdated. It's just small efficiencies that we're now making.
And that was
Will
the other thing.
those
Oh, sorry, you go.
will those efficiencies change anything about the application? Potentially not. But for these bigger firms, these more competitive offers, every small thing that we can improve, we might as well.
Put your best foot forward.
Definitely.
Cool. I was just going to say that also with to your point about the experiences, there was actually a lot of stuff that I had to go through and sort of weave out, because I was thinking, there are certain things in my GCSE career that were impressive, or career is probably the wrong word, GCSE time of life. Like I'd got a few awards at GCSE, but I was thinking, that was 5 years ago or 6 years ago. I don't think employers are going to be too fussed about what I was doing in school. So I was a bit like, right, let's narrow this down. And it felt almost a bit disheartening to take away those achievements. But I was like, if I have got something at 16 and it's to do with GCSEs, realistically, I need to highlight what I've done at university and things like that, rather than when I was in school. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. Like, it's not that those things are bad. Those things are great and they've led you to where you are now. But if I saw a CV from a third year university student that was all about GCSE and A level, I'd panic a little bit
You
because
think
that's
why?
3 years. Yeah, that's 3 years of, I would argue, university is the best place to get experience, full stop. So if you're not getting it there, then I do worry a little bit. So I think that's a good point to make. And again, LinkedIn's changed this a lot because all of those impressive things you've done can be experience on LinkedIn, which is endless. And you've kind of got this ability to put anything that you want to talk about, but don't think is the best experience you have, stick it on
Mm,
your LinkedIn. When
yeah.
people are going through your LinkedIn, they can see that trajectory. And I think that's good as well, right? Is
Yeah.
they can see you were fairly strong at GCSE, you're fairly strong at A level, you're fairly strong now. That social proof of being a high performer will
Mm.
help you out in your overall application as well.
Yeah, and to your point as well, like I completely agree about that point about LinkedIn, because it's nice to actually go onto it and see the trajectory,
Yeah,
because there were roles I did when I was much younger, like volunteer childcare assistant and a psychology internship, that all supported my application to the next point I wanted to be in my life. So those experiences were really supporting obtaining that psychology degree at Newcastle University, getting that application in. And then once I realised I wanted to do finance, you can then see the progression and the finance roles coming after that, and the insight days and the experience. And so I think it's nice to have the option of having that progression on LinkedIn, because obviously in your CV you have to be so concise and relevant to the role. So it's nice to be able to see that, I think, on a profile.
yeah, definitely. And I think that's what's quite nice about like younger people's profiles on LinkedIn, where they're
Mm.
professionals, is you can kind of get a roadmap of everything they've done, rather than if you look at a lot of seniors, they've only got their job and their university because
Yeah.
they didn't grow up with it, so they haven't went and
Mm.
added everything else. But you can see on mine from like where I worked at GCSE all the way to where I am now. And I like to think that if people took the time, they could kind of look through it and be like, oh, I can
Mm.
see where all of these like steps like led to and make sense. I think that's quite an important tool to have for
Yeah.
people that are looking at other people that are a bit further ahead and thinking, well, I'm in first year, this third year's done all these things. How have they done them? You can track it back. I think that's important as well.
Yeah, 100%. And I also think it's not, obviously what you do is very important, but I think also it's, showing a good track record. So for example,
Yeah.
if you've got evidence that somebody's been consistently throughout their life balancing, say, studies with paid work, I think that's fairly impressive, because you then got to think, oh, look, they've obviously got a certain degree of time management and work ethic. So I think that's another sort of thing that can be quite good about having those multiple different experiences and looking at the timelines as well and seeing where they've overlapped.
Yeah, I think it also endears you to recruiters. Like even at big firms where some people who are working as bankers or consultants may have never worked a part-time job, it's likely the recruiters or the HR people have worked part-time jobs, when they were studying. And I think it's a really good talking point at interviews. Like when I was doing my interview for the consultancy firm I work at now, one of the first questions they did to kind of like, start the session, get it going, was what I was doing outside of uni. And I mentioned that at the time I was working part-time Specsavers, and my project manager who was interviewing me also did that when he was at uni. So like,
Oh,
building
straight away.
building that rapport straight away is really useful. And I think it's a really good thing to one, build character, definitely build money because uni is definitely
Yeah.
expensive, but
Yeah.
also to get those skills, I think is really key. So yeah, I think the
Yeah.
CV is in a really good position. Talking to you as well, I don't think interviews are going to be a problem.
Oh,
You come
thank
across as
you.
quite confident. Well, it's a big thing to consider. A lot of people do really well on their CVs and then they can't sell themselves or they're not quite as confident yet. So I think it's a good thing to have for sure. The
Yeah, thank
LinkedIn's also not bad. It's not as consistent as I'd like, but
Okay.
also you're not really promoting anything outside of yourself, and we're not interested in growing on LinkedIn, I'd imagine. So like that's fine. It's not a problem. The only thing I would say is there's two parts to it. The job search is largely about visibility. Give yourself as much visibility as you can. If the CV is already really good and we're already quite confident, I'd potentially push things like being a first class grad, your uni experience, the experience you've already got as someone going into finance from a non-traditional finance background, especially. I think all of those things can be really interesting LinkedIn content. And where you're really lucky is, unless you want to make it into a content brand, it doesn't actually matter if it never picks up and no one ever sees it. You can even argue that might be an advantage if you don't want to be known in the space. But what it will mean is recruiters will either see your profile more and more, or especially when they're researching you, they will see that active engagement. As we were saying earlier, we need to move from a student at a university to someone who is a professional that is actively engaging with the sector. Best way to do that is I would focus content around what would a first year or second year version of you want to know about finance? What would they want to know about the course? What would they want to know about how to do well at uni? Tons of people are doing this now, especially finance people. There is a reason why almost every finance bro has a newsletter and a podcast and all of that, because it works really well. Like even if you've got a newsletter that no one reads, it shows you've covered a whole bunch of content on markets or on, certain trades that are going on that is really valuable to then talk about at interview. So I'd say the next step for you is increasing that visibility.
Yeah, and
Sometimes,
sorry, you go. I keep on interrupting you.
no, it's all good. It's teams. It's like that. Sometimes the visibility angle comes with a bit of resistance, but I'm not hearing a lot of that from you.
No, and to your point as well, like I actually, the whole newsletter and podcast thing, I would genuinely really like to do that. Like, it's
Mm-hmm.
a sort of thing where like well, when I was much younger, when I was literally 10, I used to have like a little YouTube channel where I'd post just silly videos. But
Mm-hmm.
I really, really enjoyed actually that sort of content creation from a young age. And so I think actually tailoring that to finance could then be a really fun thing to do. And also, as you said, I'm not fussed about necessarily loads of people seeing it or etc. But even if I was just to help one or two people, because even before I started my internship at TJX, I rarely posted on LinkedIn, and I think now it's definitely something that I'm trying to focus on doing a little bit more. But also the point you mentioned as well about having that different background, a non-traditional finance background, it's actually something that I was really worried about coming into this, role. For example, at TJX, I was thinking, oh no, everyone here is going to have done economics or accountancy. But firstly, I'd say only about 50% of people do. But also a lot of the firms I've realized that I'm applying to actually really value, a different approach to problem solving or, anything innovative that you can bring. And so I think that's definitely potentially something to highlight in interviews, is that, I have this experience of psychology, you know, commercial, etc. And it's like, I think that's just an important thing to hone on, is that I've not just got this sort of rigid finance background. And you know, of course, there's so many advantages to having a finance background as well. But I think in the sense that I can bring in, you know, I've got this different approach. This could be different here, and here's how I might help. I think that could be, you know, something important to mention going forwards.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's an interesting point of where finance sits in terms of, for certain careers, you need a certain degree to do them, right?
Mm,
Well, not necessarily, but broad strokes.
yeah.
Medicine, you need a medical degree. Law,
Yeah.
you need to law or law convert. Finance sits on the opposite end, where it's much more around uni prestige than it is around the degree you do. So doing a degree at university that doesn't align with finance isn't necessarily a problem, as long
Yeah.
as the university has good networks, or the other part, the student works to build those networks for themselves. Because there's people that come from fairly average universities that still go on to do finance because they've just built the kind of network around themselves. You're
Yeah.
at a very good university, building that into all your achievements and stuff. I think you're in a really good position for this. What you were
Cool.
just talking about, though, it was interesting to me. We talk with and work with some guys called the Smart Money Show. I'm not sure if you've heard of these guys before.
It doesn't ring a bell,
Mhm.
no.
No worries. They are a finance podcast, but it's made for students and it's built by students. So if we
Mhm.
were talking about that idea of talking about markets, talking about stuff in finance, even your own experience in finance, they might be a good group to reach out to. And we could
Mm.
definitely try and put in a word for you if it'd be something you'd be interested in, to either go on their show or do an episode,
Mm.
etc.
Oh,
Because
100%.
they've been recruiting for roles for a while. Obviously, can't promise anything, can't say they're still recruiting, but even as we've said before, opportunity isn't just when roles are open, it's also if you've got your name out there, people know when to come to you for next time as well. So if
Yeah.
we're looking for an easy way to increase your reach in terms of who will reach out to you via finance, I think they're potentially a really good next move for you.
100%. I would be so open to that. And the other thing is also that I think that's something I would genuinely really enjoy as well. Like I think actually something that I have noticed as well throughout this whole application process is just to actually try and enjoy the process and make the most of it. And so I think the ideas you've had about, you know, going onto that, or, you know, creating that newsletter or that podcast, I actually think that not only does that demonstrate initiative, but it's also actually going to be something that I would genuinely really, really enjoy. I think that's, if anything, the most valuable
Yeah,
essentially.
definitely. The first part of this really is that when you're enjoying something, you're less stressed. When you're less stressed, you perform better. You know, like if I think back to, I landed my grad scheme in 26 applications, which was a pretty short amount of time,
It's
even
really
back
good.
then. Yeah,
Mm.
thanks. But 23 of them were a disaster. It was only the last three that were like, I really started understanding the process. And once I
Yeah.
understood the process, enjoyment became a lot easier. And
Yeah.
the interview that I did really well in was the one I enjoyed, right? Like I got
Yeah.
on well with the interviewer, I knew my stuff, I felt in a very like friendly and professional environment. All
Yeah.
of that kind of aligned. And so that enjoyment, I think, is really key. One, you'll perform
Exactly.
better. And
Yeah.
also, burnout is a real thing.
Yeah.
Losing kind of yourself in the applications is a real thing as well. And this is something we covered before we started the recording, but that application burn rate is really important. So, as we said outside of this, 6 days with 1 day rest is fantastic. Having that
Mm.
1 day rest is really important. I'd also
Yeah.
urge you to like bake in rest into your schedule for the whole process. Every day, make sure you're getting some type of rest. And the reason I say this is a lot of people use the phrase or the argument that job searching is like having a job in
Yeah.
itself,
Yeah.
but you get to leave work. I think a lot of people miss that part of job searching. Like if you do a 9 to 5, you still get to relax. I think where a lot of people get it wrong is job searching is a job that never ends for a lot of people. And I
Yeah.
think there's got to be a sense of personal time management and responsibility here, where if you're setting your time up right, work
Mm.
really hard, and then rest. Don't not schedule it. Don't do it kind of flippantly. If we're working on job hunting, actually job hunt properly and then rest. I think a lot of people perform job hunting, which is going to sound a bit harsh, but I don't think it's untrue, where essentially they're hitting 100, 200, 300 applications. And it's because they're not giving themselves the time to actually reflect on the process. They're just automatically throwing stuff out, either LinkedIn Quick Apply or a manual version of LinkedIn Quick Apply. And so I think it's really important that every few applications, you're tracking where you are, what stage you're getting to, and how happy you are with it.
Do you know, honestly, that's everything you've just said. I completely agree with, because what I do after every application, whether it's successful or not, I've actually been, if I've got any, I've been like writing down like all of my reflections. Oh, it's blurred, but writing down all of the reflections for each like application. And so regardless of how it went, I'm then learning. So for example, with my Deloitte online assessments, I've literally just written down about practicing like firm specific tests and like the specific companies. And so I think if you actually allow yourself time to reflect, you learn so much, and you can then bring that to the next application. So something that I found was that when I first started doing psychometric tests, I was so overwhelmed. But by the time I'd done a few, I then, when it came to a really important firm to me, which was PwC, I then passed their test because I'd practiced so many different times and failed so many times and reflected so many times that I was like, okay, now I know what to do. So I 100% agree with that.
Well done on the PwC one. That's meant to be a really hard one.
It was
100%. And the other thing as well with this is it's good that you're getting those reflections before you get feedback, because a lot of people will reflect on how something went after they've got the feedback. And at that point, the reflection's not as useful because it's not a snapshot of how you felt, it's mixed with how the recruiter also felt about you. So having that reflection before you get any feedback back means that even if it's a good application and you felt badly about it, you can see there's a misalignment, right? And I think that alignment is the thing to aim for, because if you're changing your approach with every single piece of feedback you get, you can also run into a problem where different places are looking for different stuff, right? So I worked with a student who's now at Bloomberg, but it took a bit of time for her to understand that if one company was telling her that her answers were too detailed and another company were telling her answers, were too quick, then maybe she just had to make a choice of how she was going to do her applications, and a company eventually would like it, rather than, if company A and company B are telling you different things, it's very possible that you keep micro adjusting and never actually find that authentic voice to how you interview and how you apply. I think that's the thing as well. I think once you've, obviously within reason, but once you've found kind of a voice or a style you like, try and stick with it. And those reflections should be building up that approach rather than waiting for HR to tell you what they think, the issue was or whatever. And then the last part is just keep your mental. Job hunting can be over very quickly, and hopefully it is for you. A lot of people we work with, they do a few sessions with us and then something comes their way. I think a big part of that is just talking through the process with someone takes away a lot of the stress and people perform better. But even if it's over quickly, we're probably looking at 30, 40, especially for finance, maybe 50 applications. So just keep that process, keep that mentality up. But I think you're in a really good position, to be honest with you.
Cool, thank you so much. And also to your point about the mentality thing, there's been, I mean, I'm lucky, I've only been doing this for 9 days now or something. It's been very recent, my job search beginning. But something I've realized that it is so easy to get down when you see that rejection letter. So I've not heard back from many firms yet, and the majority of it has been successful at each stage. But seeing that rejection and thinking, oh no, am I not good enough, or etc., like I think it can be quite a daunting thing. But I think like the main thing I've just been trying to do is acknowledge, okay, what can I learn from this, and how can I use this to not just feel rejected but to do better in my next application. But also then structuring in things that set the day and that aren't just related to job applications. So for example, doing like a 6:30 7 p.m. gym class, has just been so good, because you get out the house, it's an end to the work day, because I think otherwise it is so easy to just get demotivated. But I do think also that the more you do, the more your confidence does build. Like, as I mentioned with the whole psychometric tests, just 2 days ago I was having a mental breakdown to my mum saying I'm never going to pass them, they'll never want me, and then I'd passed one of the big fours, so I was like, hold on, like, it's just practice. So yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point as well about like not just setting breaks, but setting breaks that are effective. Like,
Yeah,
a lot of people will break, but they'll break in their bed, or they'll be watching
yeah,
TikTok, or they'll be doing something like that. And like nothing, well, quite a bit against TikTok, but nothing against TikTok specifically. But
yeah,
that's not a rejuvenating break for the type of intense work you should be doing. And I think that's the thing. I think is when you don't have those proper breaks, you don't have that proper workflow, and then very quickly you get a lot of people who are pseudo working when they're applying to things, right? They're kind of going through the motions rather than taking it seriously. And I think that's
yeah.
a big thing to get over, which is a really good position to be in. But now I think definitely strong application. I think keep going. You're building up some really good momentum.
Cool, thank you so much. And it does mean a lot as well to hear that, because it's like, when you sort of get a bit demotivated and you're like, oh no, but like it's nice to hear that sort of positive feedback and encouragement. And I think, just as you said, just keeping that mentality of like eventually you will get there. And I think I was saying this also to my mum, that like it's not the rejections, it's more the not knowing. So I think I was saying to her, I know this is going to sound ridiculous, but if I knew in 6 weeks' time I'll have an offer from PwC, I'd be like, oh, brilliant, like this will be a breeze. But like you don't know whether it's going to be a week, a year, multiple years. And I think that's the part where you have to just keep going and try to avoid getting burnt out, to your point. So yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think that's important. But it comes for everyone eventually. Like
Yeah.
a lot of people, it takes a while, but a lot of people also aren't in your position. Where the reason a lot of people, there was an article about this recently on the BBC. Some some students took like 350 applications. But if you actually read the article, the student themselves admitted that until maybe application 150, there were mistakes in their CV. So I think when we're running these numbers, we have to think about what counts as your best application and starting from there. You're already at a point where we're in a really strong position. A lot of people would have hit this point 30, 40 applications in after going back and trying something else. So I
Yeah.
think because of that, I'm going to give it 30 to 40 applications, maybe 50. But after that, I'd be expecting final interviews, not offers, never going to promise offers, but you'll be building up enough experience that a final interview is an offer unless someone's better than you. That's all the final interview is. They basically decided on paper they will take you. They'll just take one of maybe four people. So it depends
Mhm.
how good everyone is on the day. But if you can get a final offer, it basically means you're good enough to get the offer. Sorry, if you get a final
Mhm.
interview, you're good enough to get the final offer itself. So I think
Mhm.
that's a good thing to think about as well. If we're aiming for final interviews, we'll be in the right
Mhm.
kind of place. Awesome.
Brilliant. Yeah. I just want to say just one more thing as well. I'd seen
Mm-hmm.
that you'd liked a LinkedIn post that I'd also liked. And it was about how, when you see job applications and it's like 1,000 applicants clicked apply for this. And it was that post where the
Yeah,
recruiter
yeah.
said that only 7 were actually suitable. And when I saw that, I suddenly had this like burst of confidence, because I was like, you see that and you think, oh no, there's going to be 999 incredible applicants other than me. Oh no. But then if you think about it, like, how many of those people are doing tailored CVs, are doing the psychometric practice, etc. So I think, it is so important to keep reminding yourself, it's okay, just keep going, try not to get bogged down by the numbers or intimidating factors. Because I think at the end of the day, like if you do have a strong CV and you've practiced, like there's no reason preventing you from getting a job. You just need to show up as your best self on
Yeah,
the
I
day.
definitely think that's true. And yeah, I remember that post. It's very interesting because I think what it links back to me, you may have experienced this at uni.
Mm.
Uni was probably 300, 400 people in a course, maybe a bit less. How many of those people could you tell me really fully tried at uni? Because for me, like it's in the 20 to 30 mark out of
Yeah,
300 people,
yeah.
and not being disrespectful to anyone, but there's this phenomena in statistics called Price's law, Price's rule. Not sure if you've heard of it.
Uh, I'm not 100% sure.
Okay, yeah, no worries. The square root of a population does 50% of the work. So out of 100 people, 10 people will provide 50% of the value in that system. And like, I'm not sure if that's statistically true, but
But it would make
thinking
sense though.
thinking back to a lot of my experiences, it makes
Yeah.
sense, you know.
I'm
So
just thinking back now, I'm like, oh, hold on.
yeah, like people that do really well are a very small number of people, partially because there'll be lots of people that are kind of in a position that you were talking about, where actually they're really good, but they're intimidated. They never apply. So actually, it's a bit messed up, but there's probably loads and loads of really good applicants that would be better than most of that 1,000 that did apply. And then 700 people just aren't there yet. Like, as that post was saying, they're either not aligned with the job, they haven't quite figured their CV out, tons of problems that they need to fix.
Yeah.
So then really you're only applying for really like 200 people, and then you're probably better than most of them. And I think that's the thing, like very quickly, I think my comment on that was something like, if you're a top applicant, it doesn't matter how many people apply because you
Yeah.
you clear everyone else so quickly. The
Yeah.
statistics on this usually are, by the psychometric test, 80% of the candidates have already been screened out. That's the whole
Yeah.
point of the psychometric test. It's meant to just take all the people who
Yeah.
you're never going to be able to interview and figure out, are they even worth interviewing in the first place.
Yeah.
So once you're past psychometric test and we're into either interviews, or we're into, when we're at audit firms and accountancy firms, maybe partner interviews and stuff like that, when we're at those later stages, there's actually very few people who you've got left to compete with. And
Yeah.
the more experience you get in those final stages, the better you get. So very
Mm.
quickly it turns around.
100%. Yeah. And I also was saying this, like, I think like, I've got a certain education track record. Like, I know I can pass the psychometric test, but for me they were just the absolute biggest barrier in terms of like a mental block. Because I was like, oh no, there's this stat about so many people getting weaved out. But then, once you get past that, I think I'm far more confident in terms of doing interviews and stuff. And then, you get that confidence the further you go through the process. Like, yes, you get more, it's higher stakes, but once you get that confidence of passing those tests, you're really in with a chance, and that you can prove that you'd be a really suitable candidate.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. I was the same. Like, situational judgment tests took a while because they suck and no one knows how to do them.
Oh, I
But
quite like them.
fair enough. You might be the one person. All of the logic tests were fine. The written
Yeah,
tests were fine. It was the maths for me. My maths isn't the strongest, but it was more to do with the time pressure of it. I just could not
100%.
figure out the time pressure at all, especially because I did some strategy consulting applications as well, and they do, I think it's called like negative marking, where essentially a correct answer is 3 points, a wrong answer is -1 point. So you
Yeah.
can't even like just
Yes.
guesstimate stuff either. Like
Yeah.
it's brutal. And
Yeah.
then as soon as I got past the assessments, interviews were perfect. And I think that's the thing as well. Knowing that about your application strategy is really important as well, because as soon as we're past the aptitude tests, you can be like, right, that one's basically banked. I can do the interview, and the only difference will be, is there someone better than me,
Mm,
or do I need more experience? Which they are the two best conditions outside of getting the offer, right? Someone
yeah.
better than you is something you can't control. And in the market we're currently in, is going to happen to you a lot, because there's graduates from last year and last year and last year all trying to get this job, especially 2 3 years ago. It's their last time to do it. So that will happen to you. And then if you need more experience is fairly easy to get. Like obviously not internships and placements, that can be a pain, but Forage is very, very good at this stage, and I think more students should definitely use it. I think a lot
Yeah.
of people turn their nose up at it because it's an online thing, but it's an online thing accredited by companies, so I think it
Yeah.
is quite effective. So as long as we're building that experience, building that visibility, I think you're in a really strong position.
And also, to your point about Forage, like that's something I actually did last month in September, because I saw that somebody done it on their LinkedIn, and I thought, oh, hold on, this would be a great way for me to show a little bit more interest, because I was thinking, you know, I've got this good commercial finance internship, but what about audit specifically? You know, that maybe it's not, you know, the longest, most impressive experience, but it does show initiative. And that could be the one thing that differentiates you from a different candidate, is that you've taken the time and effort to do a course that somebody else might not have. So I think Forage is great.
Yeah, yeah, no, I think well, that's really good. Awesome. Right, so that's time. I hope that session was
Ooh,
really useful. I've got a
thank you
lot of
so
value out of that.
much. Yeah, I had to say, honestly, thank you so much. Like, all of your advice and support has just been so useful. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, it's all good. No worries. Best of luck in the future. If you need any
Thank
more
you.
support, let us know. And keep in
Brilliant.
touch. It'll be cool to know how things progress.
Thank you so much. I will do. And hopefully in a few weeks, I'll be able to message you saying, I got this job.
Yeah, hopefully it helps out our posting a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Well, thank
All
you so,
right.
so
Take
much. I
care.
really appreciate that. See you later.